The pen felt heavy in my hand. I stared at the document, then at my husband's smug face across the dining table. He said, "I signed." I placed my keys next to the papers and I walked out of my own penthouse without looking back. The next morning, his attorney called him screaming, _quote_2_. But let me take you back to where this all began. I met Marcus at a charity gala in downtown Seattle 6 years ago. I was 32, freshly promoted to lead architect at Morrison Design Group, and feeling on top of the world. He walked up to me near the silent auction table, charming smile, perfectly tailored suit, talking about his revolutionary tech startup that was going to change the construction industry. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flags. The way he name-dropped constantly, the vague answers when I asked about his actual product. The fact that he always insisted on splitting the bill because, quote, 3, even though I later learned his credit cards were maxed out. But I was lonely. I had spent my 20s building my career, working 80-hour weeks, sacrificing relationships for promotions. Marcus made me feel seen. He asked about my day. He remembered my favorite wine. He showed up at my office with lunch when I forgot to eat. We got married after 18 months of dating. My mother, God rest her soul, had passed away 2 years before. But she left me 3 things that meant everything. Her vintage Cartier watch from the 1950s, her collection of original watercolor paintings she had created throughout her life, and a handwritten letter telling me to never let anyone dim my light. I kept those treasures close to my heart. The watch was tucked away in my bedroom safe. Her beautiful paintings decorated the walls of our penthouse, and that final letter stayed in my nightstand, a constant anchor reminding me of my roots and my worth. The first year of our marriage was actually quite wonderful. Marcus was devoted and encouraging, always buzzing with excitement about his next big business idea. I didn't mind handling our living expenses while he tried to get his company off the ground. After all, isn't marriage about supporting each other through the building phase? But by the second year, things started to shift. His startup collapsed when the investors pulled out. He didn't take responsibility. Instead, he blamed the market, the timing, and even his business partners. I was the one who held him while he broke down, promising him we'd find a way through it together. To give him a clean slate, I even wiped out $30,000 of debt he had hidden from me. As we entered the third year, the pattern repeated. He launched one failed venture after another, each requiring seed money that came directly from my pocket. Every single one folded within months. Meanwhile, my own career was skyrocketing. I had been made a partner at my firm, earning $300,000 a year. Marcus, on the other hand, was only bringing home excuses. By year 4, the facade of him working completely vanished. He spent his days at golf courses and attended business lunches that stretched until late evening. He began buying expensive designer clothes, claiming he needed to look the part to attract success. I realized then that I should have walked away, but my mother's voice kept echoing in my head, telling me that marriage requires patience and that sometimes good men just need a little more time to find their way. The truth finally unraveled on a random Tuesday night. Marcus had hopped into the shower, leaving his phone face up on the kitchen island. Suddenly, a notification lit up the screen from a contact named Sophia Chen, punctuated with a heart emoji. It read, "Can't wait to be with you tomorrow, babe. Make sure to wear that shirt I picked out for you." My heart hammered against my ribs as I picked up the device and began to scroll. It wasn't just a fling. It had been going on for 6 months. 6 months of quote 9 and claims that she was the only one who truly understood him. But the most chilling part was their plan. As soon as he quote 10 of our divorce, they would be set for life. I quickly looked her up online. Sophia Chen was a lifestyle influencer with a massive following. As I swiped through her recent posts, my blood ran cold. There it was, on her wrist, my mother's vintage Cartier watch, the one I had been frantically searching for over the last 3 months. In that moment, I wanted to shatter the phone. I wanted to drag him out of the shower and scream until my lungs gave out. But I forced myself to stay calm. I took screenshots of everything, emailed them to myself, and placed the phone back exactly where it had been. That night, as Marcus lay sleeping peacefully beside me, I stayed awake in the dark, meticulously planning my next move. The very next morning, I reached out to my old college friend, Helen Park. She had risen to become one of the most formidable family law attorneys in Washington state. When she answered on the second ring, my voice didn't waver. "I need your help, Helen, and I need this handled with absolute secrecy." We met at her high-rise office later that afternoon. I laid everything out on the table, the damning text messages, financial records proving Marcus hadn't contributed a single cent to our home in 4 years, and those agonizing photos of my mother's watch on Sophia's wrist. I told her about the prenuptial agreement Marcus had manipulated me into destroying during our first anniversary, using _12_ as his weapon. Helen leaned back, her expression professional yet sympathetic. "13, she began. 14, she added with a sharp, knowing smile. 15. I asked her what she meant, and the plan we devised was brilliant in its complexity. We weren't just going to divorce him. We were going to let him walk right into a trap of his own making. Over the following 6 months, Helen and I operated like a covert intelligence team. First, I moved the penthouse into a revocable living trust. Since I had purchased the property years before I even met Marcus, using my mother's inheritance, I could legally designate it as separate property. I buried the transaction deep within layers of paperwork that I knew Marcus, with his lazy approach to anything involving actual work, would never bother to read. Then, I restructured my entire partnership at the design firm. With the support of my partners, we passed technical amendments that ensured my ownership stake was legally shielded as individual property. While Marcus was busy playing the role of a successful businessman at the golf course, I was quietly building a fortress around my life's work. As our secret preparations continued, I took one final, crucial step. I turned my own home into a witness. I installed high-definition security cameras throughout the penthouse, cleverly disguised as standard smoke detectors. Since Washington is a 2-party consent state for audio, I disabled the microphones to stay within the law, but video footage was more than enough to tell the story. The recordings were heart-shattering. They captured Marcus and Sophia lounging in my living room while I was at the office, treating my home like their personal playground. I watched as they rifled through my private drawers, my jewelry box, and my confidential files. In one particularly painful clip, Sophia was trying on my mother's favorite earrings, laughing with Marcus about how I was too, 16 to even notice they were missing. But the breaking point came when the cameras caught them carefully boxing up 3 of my mother's original watercolor paintings and carrying them out to Sophia's car. When I returned home that evening and saw those hollow, empty spaces on my walls where my mother's soul used to hang, I nearly collapsed. I called Marcus, fighting to keep the tremor out of my voice, and asked if he knew where the artwork was. His response was chillingly dismissive. 17, he said, barely looking up from his drink. 18, he had handed my most precious memories to his mistress and had the audacity to call them, 19. My mother had poured years of her life into those paintings. To an appraiser, they were worth a few $1,000s, but to me, they were priceless treasures of her love and vision. I locked myself in the bathroom and wept in silence for an hour. But when I finally stood up, I wiped my eyes, fixed my makeup, and felt a cold, hard resolve take over. The trap was set, and it was time to let him walk into it. With my heart hardened and my plan in motion, I waited for Helen to finalize the _20_ documents. On the surface, the paperwork looked like a standard, boring agreement regarding the distribution of minor household assets during our separation. But hidden within the dense, technical legalese was a critical clause. Marcus was acknowledging that he had already received full and final compensation for any and all claims to property acquired during the marriage. The success of the entire operation rested on one thing: Marcus's arrogance. He had spent years underestimating me, convinced I was a naive woman he could easily manipulate. And, as expected, his own ego was his downfall. About 3 weeks ago, Marcus decided to make his move. He marched in with demands drafted by some low-rate discount lawyer, who had clearly fed him fantasies of a massive windfall. 21, he declared during dinner as if he were discussing the weather. 22, I gave him the performance of a lifetime. I pretended to be devastated. I let my voice crack. I let the tears fall. And I pleaded with him to reconsider. I let him bask in the glory of his supposed victory until he was practically glowing with self-importance. Quote 23. I finally whispered, looking properly defeated. Quote 24. Marcus didn't even reach for his reading glasses. He was so busy smirking at his phone, likely messaging Sophia about the millions he thought he'd just won, that he scribbled his signature on the lines Helen had prepared. He signed away his rights to my life's work, my home, and my future, all while believing he was the smartest person in the room. He had no idea that the document I signed in return, the one that supposedly gave him the penthouse, was a legally hollow quitclaim deed, because you cannot transfer a property that is already held in an untouchable trust. The trap had finally snapped shut. The following morning, Marcus woke up in what he imagined was his new kingdom. He walked into the kitchen, ready to start his first day as a wealthy bachelor, but the house didn't welcome him. When he tried to command the smart home system to make coffee, it remained silent. I had revoked his voice access the night before. Frustrated, he tried to call building management to force his way back into the system, only to be told that his name wasn't on the ownership records. It never had been. The trust was the owner, and I was the only trustee with the power to make decisions. Infuriated, he decided to leave the building to clear his head, but his Tesla sat motionless in the garage. Since the car was registered in my name and paid for with my earnings, I had simply disabled it via the mobile app. When he tried to summon an Uber, every credit card in his wallet was declined. I had severed the link to my accounts. He was a king with no crown, no horse, and no gold. He desperately tried to reach Sophia, but she wasn't picking up. She was a bit occupied at the time. The Seattle Police Department was currently executing a search warrant at her apartment. Thanks to my hidden camera footage, we had undeniable proof of her removing my mother's paintings and jewelry. Helen had filed the report with surgical precision, and the local prosecutor was eager to make an example of a high-profile influencer caught with a haul of stolen family heirlooms. In Sophia's bedroom, they found it all: the 1950s Cartier watch, the emerald ring that belonged to my grandmother, and those 3 precious watercolor paintings, leaning against her wall like trophies of her conquest. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, her carefully manufactured luxury brand vanished in an instant. Brands cut ties immediately, and her 200,000 followers watched in shock as her life was deconstructed in real time. Marcus was left standing on a sidewalk, penniless and alone, while his mistress was being processed into the system for felony possession of stolen property and conspiracy to commit theft. The divorce was finalized a mere 6 weeks later, and the outcome was absolute. Marcus walked away with nothing. In fact, he walked away with less than nothing. The court ordered him to pay full restitution for every family heirloom he had surreptitiously sold or gifted over the years, from my grandmother's silver tea set to rare books from my father's library. Sophia, desperate to avoid prison, pleaded guilty to reduced charges. She was sentenced to probation and extensive community service, but the true punishment was the public apology she was forced to issue. Her career as an influencer was dead. Last I heard, she was working behind a department store makeup counter, a haunting shadow of the luxury lifestyle she once flaunted. As for Marcus, he slunk back to his mother's house in Spokane. At 45, he has no career, no savings, and a digital footprint that will warn every future employer or partner exactly who he is. Some might call my actions cold. They might say I should have simply walked away and moved on. But those people haven't held a dying mother's hand and promised to protect her legacy. They haven't seen a stranger wearing their family's soul on Instagram. I wasn't being cruel. I was being thorough. I simply stopped being the safety net for a man who was actively trying to destroy me. Last night, I finally rehung my mother's watercolors on the penthouse walls. I placed her Cartier watch back in the safe, right next to the letter I still read whenever I need to find my center. For the first time in 6 years, the air in this home feels light. I sat in my living room, poured a glass of wine, and toasted to the quiet. If you are listening to this and you see your own reflection in my struggle, remember this. Document everything. Find an attorney who fights like a lion, and never, ever let someone convince you that you're difficult for wanting to protect what is rightfully yours. My husband thought a charming smile was enough to steal my life's work. He was wrong. I am my mother's daughter, and I have finally reclaimed my light. This is Elena signing off from a bright, sun-drenched Seattle.